Okay, good afternoon, everyone. I see people are still joining, but we'll kick off now, I think, with the introduction. Thank you very much for joining us today to our esteemed panel of representatives who I'll be introducing during the webinar on the theme Safeguarding Your Business and Mitigating Risks in Times of Disruption. This webinar will run for an hour and 15 minutes, just so you can plan your time. We'll go through the running order just now. And for a lot of you who'd like to know, what is Let's Talk Business? Let's Talk Business is a new platform which is being offered by Automechanika globally, and it's for an international audience with a focus on industry and trade under the motto, Let's Talk Business, a series of panel discussions on current topics with international key players, associations, and supporters. This series will be run as a 6-part series in the lead up to Automechanika Johannesburg next year, which is the largest automotive aftermarket trade show in Africa and will take place between the 15th to the 18th of March 2022 at the Nasrec Expo Center in Johannesburg. So just some information, a broad concept note. In the midst of unparalleled social, political, and economic turmoil, how do businesses position and prepare for the next disruption to ensure continuity and sustainability? What steps need to be applied to ensure a carefully considered response that will provide the necessary agility and resilience to execute a business continuity plan? I'm certainly looking forward to the content, some great speakers lined up. It's a very interesting and relevant topic at the moment. Just so you know, some housekeeping, please do use the Q&A tab if you have specific questions that you would like to address. And please put in there who you'd like to address the question to. You can also use the comments tab if you'd like to make comments as we go through the session. There will be a Q&A session at the end of the presentations. So we may only get around to answering them as Yaki Olivia will take over and manage the Q&A sessions. So the flow for today, I'm obviously doing the opening for Let's Talk Business. I'm going to hand over now to ABSA, Tami Letsualo, who's going to do an introduction and set some context. We'll then move over to Robbie Del Caso, who's going to do an introduction to the process to overcome disruption. Then Poko Masha, who will cover insurance considerations, and then Brandon Cohen, who will go through legal and compliance considerations and the implications thereof. And then again, as I said, towards the end, we will have a Q&A session of about 15 minutes before we move to closing. So without further ado, I would like to introduce you to our next speaker, Tami Letsualo, who's the automotive sector specialist at ABSA Bank. Tami is focusing on wholesale, retail, and franchising for sales of motor vehicle sector, automotive aftermarket sector, and fuel sector, by providing customer-specific financial and non-financial solutions from a financial institution. He is an automotive thought leader focusing on the whole sector, including enterprise development and changes in the industry. His qualifications include a BCom in marketing management from the University of Pretoria, an MDP management development program, a PGP postgrad diploma through Gibbs, and an MBA Masters of Business Administration from Gibbs Gordon Institute of Business Science. Welcome, Tami.
No, thanks for that, Josh. Okay. Now, thanks for that, Josh, and welcome everyone. So for us, as the topic suggests, I mean, we are living in recent times where we have witnessed disruptions from personal life to public and business life. The pandemic and economic turmoil has made all of us to review, reimagine, and replan ways of doing business and how we also conduct our general life on a daily basis. For the South African economy that is still struggling, and we've seen a high unemployment rate on the youth, and also the recent incidents in KZN and Gauteng have added more negative outlook on businesses and communities that the business operates from. And with this said, the automotive industry as a whole, whether it's aftermarket or the OEM side, all the industry was not left unscathed during all these global changes and local changes that we have faced. So we have seen most businesses that we've started to focus more on the lockdown regulation and staying afloat on the businesses. And on that scenario, we've seen businesses to have started to neglect one of the key line items, which is insurance. With that said, the pandemic has created supply chain problems for the aftermarket sector and slowing down the ability for the business to generate income, deliver products, and this stretched the cash flow reserves, resulting in some businesses having to cut costs to stay afloat on that. And the impact of businesses cutting certain important line items, we are starting to see the results of that. Insurance has been one of the line items that has been cut during these critical times as business owners are trying to make sure that they stay afloat and they're saving costs. And this has placed majority of businesses that have chosen to cut this essential product in a worse off positions, especially in those two provinces that we've talked about. As ABSA, we have been proactive in assisting businesses during the pandemic and short-term reliefs in a form of working capital, payment holidays, suspension of rental or service fees. And these have worked with majority of our customers as we've also restructured their finances to make sure that they stay afloat, as we believe that the economy is starting to show positive signs of recovery, and risk mitigation serves as a basic to kickstart our economy, especially in these hub provinces that we have. For us, insurance provides safety and securities, as it always provides financial support and decreased dangers in economic and social life, and provides much needed cover during sudden loss of income, livelihoods, and businesses, as we have seen recently on that, over and above losses that you have seen in businesses closing down. And insurance is a key component for us as a financial institution, as it spreads risk and it eliminates risk for the individual through transfer of that risk to an insurance company. And with all this, it aggregates amount of the risk in the economy and substitute a certain cost for uncertain and the losses that we have seen. So with that, we've also seen how the business have responded, and the key three things that the business have looked at, it's their concern for people, finances, and resources. For people and having the insurance and trying to mitigate risk as far as possible. For people, we've seen people want to come back to work. However, they need that guarantee in terms of protection, guarantee for health, including income, and just normal protection of coming back to work. From finance point of view, the focus will be on cash flow risk mitigation on that. How do you manage your cash flow, the cycles of that? Because this has a direct impact on your bottom line and the net flows of your businesses. In terms of resources, we've seen businesses that have decided to look upstream and downstream in terms of collaboration and creating new value chains that are supporting across sectors, not only in automotive. And we've seen that automotive, it has played a critical role with the ability of them to be able to change their factories to create more products that will support other industries. Therefore, as ABSA, we see that in the long run, the automotive industry faces a profound transformation towards customer centricity and being able to deliver products at the time the customer requires them to do that. These uncertain times will require us to make sure that we work in a collaborative way, especially in the automotive industry. And for customers or people that are in the automotive industry, it's very critical that you approach your financer, you have the right insurance cover to cover you around this time, because your cash flow is currently being stretched on that. So we need to make sure how you transfer your risk, and we will be managing that. So I'm looking forward to the next 6 series with Mr. Frankfurt, RMI, as for us as a business, I mean, we are looking at collaborating to make sure that we are able to assist our customers on that. I'm looking forward to take your questions later on. Back to you, Josh. Thanks.
Thanks, Tommy. Very nice introduction, and thanks again to ABSA for the role it's playing. I'd like to move on now to our next speaker, who is Robbie Del Corso. Just as way of an introduction to his topic, which is an introduction to the process to overcome disruption. Robert Del Corso is a premier aftermarket leadership expert, consultant, coach, mentor, speaker, trainer, and webinar host. Roberto has a truly unique skill set and capabilities that powerfully improve personal and professional results fast. Businesses leverage his skills to generate more productivity, engagement, profitability by maximizing the results of their teams. Roberto delivers reliably and consistently, combines his 21 years of international corporate experience in the automotive industry with his energetic and entertaining style. Roberto has led teams on 3 continents to launch 37 product lines and services, generated over 1 billion euros rather of additional sales. His passion for inspiring people has set him apart, working in 35 countries across North America, Africa, Europe, and the Middle East. Roberto is a serial board member, has an MBA from De Montfort University, and as a NLP certified coach, knows how to transform lives, create lasting change, educate, and influence while creating results. Additionally, Roberto is an advocate for positive thinking, sustainable living, and is a passionate cyclist that is often seen riding Europe's toughest road races. Roberto, thanks very much, and looking forward to your presentation.
Josh, thank you so much, and good afternoon to everyone. So, in the aftermarket, I'm sure you will all agree with me that, the pace of the aftermarket, the industry is absolutely changing, and it's getting faster and faster each year. And, today in the aftermarket, the big challenge is really, how do we stay ahead of the game? How, and as you look at it, it becomes more daunting, it becomes more challenging. And it certainly, we've, from our fantastic introduction we've had, it is more necessary today than ever before. So, I want to share some communication strategies with you on this topic. But firstly, also, Josh, Automechanika team, Massey Ferguson, thank you so much, as well as ABSA South Africa, because we're talking about this incredibly detailed and complex topic, but it's an important one. So, how do we manage through change, and how do we really lead through turbulent times? So, Josh, if you can jump not quite to the next one, but yeah, that's fine. I love to give engaging presentations. I love to interact with people. So I'm going to ask you some questions from time to time. I'm going to ask you to respond to me. And at the same time, either in the chat box or a poll, as you can see, I'm going to ask you some questions. So I encourage you to respond to me so that we can learn a lot more together. So as you can see from, the poll that's up there, Josh, if you can share the poll, and I'm going to ask you, think about it on a scale of 1 to 10, where, 10 being absolutely the best, 1 being absolutely, not that great, how well does your organization initiate, implement, change initiatives over time? And I mean, the question really is, are you getting the results that you want when you want? And if you think about it, let me define change a little bit, because you can have big C changes. What, I would say is that one-off change, setting up a new facility, setting up a new production line, changing your CRM system or ERP system. That's a big C change. Or it could be a small C change in there where, small C, it's really, I'm launching a new product, launching a new service, growing a different marketplace. That could be small C change. But just think about it. How well is your organization in initiating, implementing, and getting the results out of your chain? I'd love you to, answer it, drop it into the poll that Josh has got there, because we'll have a look at the results now. And those are always interesting to have a look in there. So hopefully, Josh, everyone's busy dropping in at least a 1 to a 10, but I'd love to hear from everyone. So let's have a look at that, and we'll see what that looks like.
So we're just going to give it another 30 seconds. We're sitting on 45% of participants who've answered, but I see there's still more answers coming in.
Yeah, come
so
on,
we'll
let's see.
give it another 20 seconds if people can please respond to the survey. We would like to hear your views.
Yeah, let's see if we can get that up to 70 or 80%. Pretty much, like we've got to get COVID vaccinations to 80. Let's see if we can get this to about 80. But let's see what it can pan up to. I just want to share a little bit of, let's see where we're at. And, then we'll take it, because I'm going to deep dive into this topic in the little bit of time we've got, but we're going to deep dive into it a lot more at the moment. So if you haven't, quickly just select one and hit submit.
Okay, we're at 60%, another 10 seconds. Everyone, if you don't mind.
Last couple of seconds. Yeah, Josh, I think you can close it up and let's have a look at what that looks like. Perfect. Thank you. I love it. I love it. So we've got some interesting numbers in there. And I'm just going to quickly scroll down. Yeah, I like it. We've got a good group here. And if you can, look at the poll there, you can see we've got a little bit way down at the 10 where we're very good at it. But then there's a lot of there, 4, 5, 6s, even some 7s. And, I do this quite often. And rarely do we get, 8 and above that frequent. And again, you can see it. Yeah, we've got a couple, but it's not. So, we are struggling with change. And that's really what I want to talk about today. So, Josh, if you can close that one, I just wanted to share that with you. And you can go to the next slide also at the same time. And when you think about it, change in the aftermarket, it's happening everywhere we look, whether it's markets, whether it's technologies, competitors, customers, regulations, it was mentioned earlier, especially the way we work has radically changed, and it's different today than it was, 18 months ago. Does this sound like the world that you are working in and living in? And it's certainly the one that I see out there. And when you think about it, whether you follow Boston Consulting Group or McKinsey reports, everyone talks about, the massive change going on. And, I've listed a couple of them. I'm not going to go into the huge details of it because I think, we all agree the market is changing, but there are a couple of big groups in there where you think about it, changes in customer expectations, whether it's driven by the big data analytics or the e-commerce, the interfaces, the pricing transparency that's going on, as well as, as in the aftermarket. I quite often think we can be fairly traditional and we need to change our mindset to be more service orientated. We're getting there, but we've got to do it a little bit faster. Another big group obviously is, next generation vehicle. Is it electric? Is it hybrid? Connected vehicles, further down the line, autonomous vehicles, but those are all changing. And again, with that, you've also got all of the new software and the skills that are required. So a lot of changes taking place in there. And probably the last one is really the shifting competitive power. When you think about it, I think between the OES and the IM, there's always been a wall, and that wall has come down. So that has merged into one, as well as, competitive powers. Just think of all the new players coming in, especially on the digital side of things. And these are not traditional aftermarket players. These are brand new players. And again, so much consolidation, so much integration going on amongst the aftermarket players. And they're all looking for ways to extend, their value. So today we've got to be able to handle ambiguity. We have to be more flexible. We have to react to changes in the environment, in the market, take decisions. And I think you would agree, unclear conditions, and deal with, the complexity of trying to grow businesses in this aftermarket that we live in. And one of the things, Josh, if you can jump to the next slide, I think we agree, we're all experiencing time of tremendous disruption. And some of the most common challenges I see automotive aftermarket players facing, it's really in 4 big buckets. One of it, think about it, leading remotely. How difficult is that? Unless you've had a sales force, generally we haven't really had hybrid workforces and teams split up all over the place. So that, that becomes a complication. And some 40% of leaders lack the confidence to manage their own teams remotely, and that's really not surprising because if you think about it, when were you ever trained or did you ever receive any training? So quite often we don't even know what's being asked of the managers leading remote teams. Another main one for me has to be, managing change. And again, we've looked at the change. I mean, the last 18 months has really brought about great upheaval, and organizations, we are being called upon to really reimagine the way that we do business. We've got to care for our employees in different ways. We've got to grow the business. We've got to drive results, drive successes in very, very different ways. And again, miscommunication, when you think about it, communication, there was a recent survey by McKinsey which said, that some 70%, 77% of employees that responded said poor communication slows down the company's ability to compete. That cannot be a good thing if so many people are saying that we're slowing down the way we can compete in there. And, probably the last one, anxiety fuels fatigue. And, well, I know I'm certainly tired of it. And I think we're all feeling the pressure of everything that's been going on. So you just imagine your employees, imagine your teams. They need leaders to be more effective than ever before in there. And Josh, if you can jump to the next slide. Now, if you think about it, based on the latest research, when you think most HR managers, most executives will tell you that managing change is a top priority. And we understand why that is. The pace of change, is increasing, as we've said, and it's never happened as fast as it's happening now. It's happening 10 times faster today than it was. And the critical one, it's at 300 times the scale of the change that went on during the Industrial Revolution. And the pace of change is only going to increase. So the good news is, and think about this one, today is the slowest it's going to be from now on in the industry. Today is the slowest. That's the good news. The bad news is it's just getting faster in there, which really means that, as businesses, we need to change more frequently in the future. We need to develop, leaders, executives, the teams who know how to skillfully do this essential skill. And, when change initiatives go well, we know what happens. We improve things, we collaborate, we're creative, we're successful, productivity increases, engagement goes up, employee retention is great. But it all impacts the bottom line, and bottom lines all increase when things really work well. And Josh, if I can ask you to skip to the next slide then. Unfortunately, thanks, Josh. Unfortunately, most organizations, and these numbers have been around for a while, in fact, 60-70% of organizations have a poor track record in managing and implementing change. And that's why I asked you the question up front. And another question I have for you, and this one I want you to drop into the chat box. Now we'll have a look at it a little bit later. Why do so many change efforts fail? And it could be big C, could be small c change, but why do change, or why does it fail? It could be in your team, could be in your organization, or it could be in some, what you've seen happen in other organizations, other teams. But again, Gartner research shows that 80% of companies use a top-down approach, minimal involvement approach that kind of ignores the concerns of people who are being affected by all of this changing. And when we know what happens, when change efforts fail, well, organizations, we don't meet the goals. It's common. We don't have the results. And what happens? Time, energy, resources, and morale can absolutely be lost. And it's very quick to have that happen. So Josh, if I can ask you to switch to the next one, and then yeah, thanks, Josh. Gartner also found that successful change within organization really relies on the workforce and not just on the executives to lead the change. I believe in encouraging open, honest communication about any sort of change initiatives going wrong. And if we use the wrong approach, well, we've seen it. We've probably got a 70% chance that it's going to fail. With the right approach, to change, as you can see on the slide, we've got a much higher rate or much higher likelihood of succeeding. And, that's what all companies want. And at the same time, we're going to reap a lot of the benefits in there. When you think of implementation time can be decreased by 33%, employee engagement can increase by 38%, and obviously these are outcomes that most organizations would love to see, and that's an important one for us. And again, in the industry, we know that so much change is taking place. And Josh, if you can stick to the next, jump to the next slide, because this slide I love, and this is just my philosophy on leading people through change in the industry. Do change with people, not to people. I believe when we involve people, they tend to resist a lot least, or they don't resist at all. And success largely depends on us as the leaders who know how to lead a change process to successful completion. Because so often I heard, yeah, we're great at planning, but when execution comes around, we tend to fail on that. So we've got to be successful in bringing it to completion. And leaders who know how to create a high involvement, collaborative approach, where we involve all the parties in the change process, certainly helps to bring us a step closer to that. Josh, if you can just jump to the next one. And I thank Josh for taking, being my keyboard. But thanks, Josh. And when you look at some of the outcomes of organizations which lead people through change successfully, you get faster results. Absolutely. We know that. We've seen it. We also reduce risk as well as increase the confidence. And again, we talk about risk mitigation today. So how do we reduce risk? How do we increase the confidence? And that's where, leaders proactively, need to address, I say, the most common reasons for change and why change fails, using a proven high involvement people leadership approach. And I'm going to share that with you in just a second. We also increase the buy-in and the resilience. Your leaders can diagnose and address predictable stages of concerns that their team members are going through, help reduce that resistance, and certainly increase the buy-in and the long-term commitment of the team to driving this change through to success. And Josh, if I can just ask you to jump to the next slide. Thank you. So, and I've got a quick model up there, and research shows that, that in times of change, people really go through predictable stages of concern. And I say stages of concern, and I say predictable. Let me just expand a little bit on that, because, when you think of concerns, I don't believe concerns are negative. I think concerns are neutral. And, to me, concerns just indicates that there's some unanswered questions in there. And then I mentioned, in terms of predictable stages, which is good news, because, the good news is if people go through predictable stages of concern and they arise sequentially, so they arise in a certain sequence, in a certain order, and we know this, then you as leaders can anticipate them, surface them, and address them as they arrive. So addressing these stages can certainly remove a lot of the roadblocks that we find in, the change process. And a key reason I believe that change efforts fail is not simply a lack of communication, but a lack of focusing the communication on the 5 stages of concerns that people have about the change process. And, I won't go through a lot of those in a lot of details, but I just want to share, I'm going to focus on, the first 2 in there, and I just want to share some questions with you. But before we do that, hopefully lots of people have dropped in some ideas of, why change fails, why it gets derailed. Josh, if you can jump to the next question, because earlier I asked you guys to think about, why change efforts fail. And what we've gone and done from our research and work we've done, over the last 21 years, actually a little bit more than that, with organizations all over the world, we've identified 15 15 reasons change initiatives typically fail or get derailed, go off track, call it what you want. You don't get the results that you want, and this list might not account for every possible reason, but I think it covers the vast majority of reasons that change initiatives really fail. And, I'd love to know, did you pick any of those? We asked you why some of them failed, and I'd love to know, do you see any in there that's, possibly 1, 2, or even 3 of the reasons why you've seen change either in your team or in someone else's team or someone else's organization fail? So if you can drop that in, because, it would be really great to hear. And while, you guys drop it in, I'm not going to give you too much time because I am conscious of time. But I've shrunk that a little bit. Josh, if you jump to the next slide, I've shrunk those 15 reasons down. But what I would like you to also have a look at, as I said, these questions can be addressed in sequential areas, sequential sequence, because they do arrive. They arrive on time, every time. These are the common questions that people have. And I said to you, I wanted to focus on the top two. So the first, real one was information concerns. And Josh, if you can jump to the information concerns, the next slide, and this is really, the typical information concerns that people will have. And, the good thing, as I said, it's predictable. And the good thing is if we know these questions are coming, we can be ready to answer them satisfactorily, and only then, once we've answered them satisfactorily, can we move to the next stage in there. So when you think of the first stage of concerns, some of the typical questions are, what's this change about? What's wrong with the way we do things today? What are we really trying to accomplish in there? Or, what does the perfect view, the perfect success look like in the future? Or one quite often that people go, well, why are we doing it now? And I believe that leaders, often, are much further ahead in the change process than the people we are asking to change. So quite often, we have good rationale for why we are initiating and starting change within the organization. But, we often, unfortunately, fail to share that rationale, that thinking, that thought process, because, us as leaders have moved beyond this change stage, this change process. So those are some of the questions that you'll find coming up under the information concerns. And Josh, if you can just jump to the next one, because the next one is really, the second stage was personal concerns. And again, if we know these questions are coming, we can address them, and personal concerns are often, believe it or not, the most ignored stage of those 5 stages of concern, and there's good reason why they're ignored. Not because we want to, but personal concerns are often ignored because, believe it or not, they take more time and they take more energy to address. Typically personal concerns need to be addressed either one-on-one because they are personal, or they need to be addressed in small teams. It's not a matter of bringing up, the entire organization and addressing it there. You've got to be doing it one-on-one in small teams. And, because of that, it tends to take more time. It certainly takes more energy on the part of us as the leaders. And that's why this stage so often is not really addressed in there. So I know I've had to, I've gone through that very quickly, but I just wanted to share that with you. Now, if you do need, and Josh, if you can just jump to the next slide in there, I've got lots of resources that can help. So if you want to know more about the model, I can share the other 3 stages and I can share more about the model. Please, let me know. Happy to connect with you and talk you through the model. On the other hand, if you're saying, well, that's interesting. You mentioned research several times. Have you got some white papers supporting the research done on this model? Absolutely happy to share that with you. Or you might be saying, well, okay, it sounds pretty good. How have other people around the world implemented? And you want some client spotlights in there, happy to share some of those with you also. And again, you might also be saying, well, we're going through a real world change initiative at the moment. Let's just have a chat and brainstorm ideas. Happily, we'll get on the phone, get onto a Zoom call with you at any moment in time. So, by all means, that's really part of why we are here, is to help people through the change. Josh, if you can just jump to the second last slide in there. And, and these are my contact details. Yes, that QR code, if you click on that one, that'll connect you to me on LinkedIn. So if you do want any of the resources I showed in the previous slide, by all means, connect to me, email me. Josh has got my phone number and address, and anything that you need, please connect. Happily to share that with you. And, the last slide I just quickly wanted to share with you, it's, this is probably one of my favorite thoughts about, when you go through change, because I often believe, people that, those who battle the player, let me say that again, those who plan the battle really battle the plan. And what does that mean? I mean, it really means that, us, when we sit there and we create a strategy, we plan the strategy, but really, do we go there and have to land up executing this strategy? So I believe, by involving more people, we're going to meet with less resistance when we're trying to achieve things. So that's just my simple thoughts on how we can lead our organizations, how we can lead our people through any sort of change process, big C or small C change. And if there's any questions for me, please drop them into the queue, into the chat box. Would love to answer them later in the Q&A. Or if there's anything in there at the moment, please let me know.
Thanks, Robbie. Very interesting presentation, insightful and inspiring, if I can say so myself. As always, it's been great to have you on. I think with everything that's happened over the past year, politically, socially, economically, it's really important for companies to use this opportunity to plan for the future and to adapt. And so thanks very much. Very interesting presentation. We'll move swiftly on to our next speaker. We're just running a bit behind on time. So Poko Masha is the head of technical and reinsurance for ABSA Insurance Company, overseeing the technical underwriting operations in South Africa and the rest of Africa regional operations. With over 13 years experience in insurance operations, he has had involvement in risk analysis and tailoring of potential insurance solutions to risk exposures that commercial enterprises face in carrying out their businesses. His qualifications include a BCom in economics and a postgraduate in risk management. Poko, welcome, and we look forward to hearing from you. Let me just share your presentation. Bear me a second.
Yes,
over to you.
Yes, thank you, Josh. Thank you very much and welcome, everyone. I think Tammy has advanced quite a strong business case for why insurance is a safeguard mechanism for businesses, and we would look into that in the next few slides and cast some consideration to some aspect of insurance that can assist businesses to safeguard their operations and ensure business continuity. If we can jump over to the next slide, Josh. Yeah, I think in these slides, this is just an overview of what you can expect from our presentation today. We will touch a little bit on risk management and risk finance mechanisms. We would have a look at executive surveys on what they think to be the top 10 business risk of 2021. And we would have a little look at the insurance considerations and some of the responses that can actually assist businesses to safeguard the operations as mentioned. Jumping over to the next slide. So in this slide, we see that risk management to businesses is actually a deliberate and conscious process that businesses engage on to identify and evaluate risk, as well as put risk control measures in place, and to make sure that the risk is minimized in the business. Once these risks are identified, evaluated, and we've got risk control measures in place, then the question arises, what then? How do we then move around financing this risk to make sure that as and when it occurs, the company have financial provisions to weather the risk and make sure that the business can continue with what they do best, which is their business operations. So if you look at the diagram that goes with that, we're looking at a risk finance mechanisms there. And in these risk finance mechanisms, we can see that there are various mechanisms that businesses can actually pursue in order to make financial provisions to safeguard their businesses and make sure that they are resilient and disruption free. So if you look on the left of your slide, you would see that businesses have an option to actually make a decision to retain the risk for themselves. And if they were to retain the risk, then that would be followed by having to make cash flow provisions or even equity reserves insofar as providing for the potential risk events is concerned. The other options and mechanisms that businesses have on the right of your slide would be the option of external financing. And in this external financing, a decision gets to be made whether a risk would be provided for pre-loss, or it's something that it can be provided for post-loss. In the post-loss events, it simply means that you would be brave enough and wait for the risk to occur. And once the risk has occurred, you'll probably come up with means to find finance facilities that can fund the risk. And in the event where businesses choose to go with the pre-loss mechanism, then there are various options within which to consider how to fund the risk. And in funding that risk, then they can use this to actually safeguard the business operation. We see that among the options here, businesses have an option to actually go for self-captive funding model. And this self-captive funding model would require a partnership with self-captive insurance companies. Basically, this would involve setting up a self-captive where the businesses can actually ring-fence the fund, and these funds are ring-fenced in this particular self-captive. And these funds would solely be used for the purposes of the risk that has been identified, evaluated. And this would be part of the control measures that businesses would use to actually minimize the risk that are identified to the business to ensure business continuity. And the second option there, we see that as part of this safeguard mechanism, businesses can go for commercial insurance. And this is really where we locate the whole concept of commercial insurance as a business safeguard. And in this business safeguard, it simply means that you approach a conventional insurance company, you make a proposal to obtain an insurance coverage, and you choose insurance coverage that can actually be appropriate to the risks that have been identified in the business in exchange for a premium. And this is really where we are locating this whole concept of insurance as a safeguard to business operations and as a tool that can be used to really minimize disruptions to the business. And the other option really, which I think even becomes more relevant now for us in SA, with the recent riot that we have experienced in July and August, is the concept of state risk financing. With the state risk financing, we are looking there more along the lines of Sasria, which is a specialized insurance company owned by the state through the National Treasury there. Basically, Sasria would then cut against your riot, your civil commotion related type of disruptions to the businesses. And we have seen in the past that they really stepped up to the plate in terms of affirming the role of insurance as a safeguard to the business operations after the terrible experience of July, August. And if we jump on to the next slide, Josh. So in this slide, we have a look at what the top 10 business risk of 2021 ranked in order of 1 to 10. Are in terms of Allianz Risk Barometer survey. This is a survey of business executive that gets to be conducted annually, where as executive are asked about what they think present as a risk or major disruptions to the business on annual basis. And in fact, out of this survey, we have seen that they have some few risks that have emerged into this one. I think with the 2020 experience of the pandemic outbreaks as well. But if you have to take them in order of ranking, we see that business interruption was actually rated as number one risk of concern from this survey perspective. Number two, you're sitting with pandemic outbreaks. I mean, this include health-related issues as well as workforce restrictions of movement on people, and the general disruption on the global supply chains that we are continuing to experience as a result of these restrictions. Number three that came up there was the issue of cyber incidences This year speaks to the cyber crimes, IT failures, outages, data breaches, fines and penalties that are associated with these data breaches. They can really came in as one of the major business risk of concern in 2021 as well. There's the issue of market development as well at number 4. Here we're really talking about increased volatility, intensified competition because of new entrants, megas and acquisitions, market stagnations, and as well as market fluctuations. At number 5, you're looking at more risk of changes in legislations and regulations. You are looking at trade wars, tariffs, economic sanctions, the issue of nationalisms. I think you can also link that as well to the pandemic outbreaks now because of restrictions. Brexit, Eurozones, disintegrations as a result of Brexit as well. At number 6, you are sitting with natural catastrophes, storms, flood, earthquakes, wildfires, that can really cause untold damages to businesses as well as individual properties. The issue of fire and explosion also came up as well in the survey. We're also looking at microeconomic developments there from monetary policies, austerity programs that are currently undergo. Commodity prices increases, deflations and inflation as a result of supply and demand mechanisms there as well. I think the climate change and increasing volatility as well came as something of a concern to the business executive surveyed. And lastly, we are looking at the issue of political risk and violence. And I think again here we're looking at political instabilities, war, terrorism, civil commotion, riots and looting. And this is something that I think is still fresh in the memory of the most in the country as well. We can jump over to the next slide, Josh. And in the next slide, we would have a look at some of insurance mitigation options that are available to the business disposals that can be used to mitigate some of the identified risks. So, I mean, because in the automotive sector is one sector that really it's operating on a global value chain basis where you find that production can take place in various geographic locations and regions. It's always appropriate to make sure that you have relevant property damage policies in place that can also provide you with cover for business interruptions. You need to ensure that you've got transit covers in place that can also speak to the movements of goods and parts and services in between the various geographic locations. And this can also take care of things like natural catastrophes, fire and explosions, as well as increased weather volatilities and climate changes, damages that comes with that. The other response that we can look at really is the issue of comprehensive motor insurances in the event of aftermarket sales as well as franchise sales. You can look at things like motor traders, internal and external risk, as well as associated third-party liabilities. This can assist you with making sure that when your vehicles that are the subject of sale are at your premises can also get insurance protection. In case something happens to them, you know that you've got a safeguard in place that can ensure business continuity there. I mean, here you are looking to get cover for accidental damages for both vehicles that the businesses use, for vehicles that would be for stock in trade, third-party liabilities generally that comes with being in custody and control of those vehicles and potentially those that belongs to the client. You also get financial protection covers such as credit shortfall once your vehicles are financed that can assist the clients to make sure that in the event of damages, they are not left in a worse off place financially. And second last, you're looking at comprehensive liability covers here that can assist you with environmental liability exposures in the event of the fuel sectors where you've got fuel deliveries and fuel storages in the event of fuel spills or the third parties that you may encounter as a result of the transit and transportation of that on the road. These type of covers can assist with that. And you can see at the bottom of that, it speaks to the issue of that environmental exposures, transport, transit, and associated liabilities that comes with that. And the other risk that was picked up really was the cyber risk incidences. We see that the insurance market also can offer covers that speaks to the cyber risk, and these covers really can assist with cyber crimes, including business cyber crimes. And under these cyber crimes, really you're looking for covers like cyber crimes for incidents related to cyber crimes, as well as data breaches and fines and penalties that comes with that. The second last two to consider is the issue of pandemic outbreaks. I think on this one, globally, we have seen that insurance companies really stepping up here and once again affirming insurance as a safeguard to businesses at large. Insurance companies have already made payments here to businesses in excess of 5 billion to date as a result of the interruptions and disruptions that came from the pandemic outbreaks. But really here, this is a topic really that is a stock in trade argument from an industry perspective as to whether this is a peril that was ever intended to be covered. And we have seen some of these cases ended up in court. And as a result of that, insurers have come forward from this point of view to start specifically excluding pandemic-related outbreaks and interruptions, because they believe that this is something that would be more state risk financing related. And at the bottom of that, you would see that there are political risk and violence. I think the damages that were caused as a result of the July and August riots really caused untold damage to both businesses and personal properties. We are talking here some damages in excess of 20 billion rand. And we have seen here Sasria also stepped up to the plate and really ensured that businesses continue to operate and really once again became that safeguard to the businesses and a mechanism that really used to minimize disruptions. So in short, insurance is firmly placed as a mechanism and tool that really businesses have at their disposal to really safeguard their operations and use it as a tool that they can minimize disruptions to their businesses. And that's the end of it, I think, Josh, on the next slide. And yeah, thank you for your time, guys. Back to you, Josh.
Thank you, Poko. Very interesting presentation. Again, just summarizing and also stressing the importance of making sure businesses are ready for potential risks in the future, as we've seen in the past year with all the volatility and change. How important it is to make sure that you have the right insurance and cover in place to protect your business in the future. We'll move swiftly on now to our next presentation. Brandon Cohen. Just as a way of introduction, Brandon Cohen is the Chief Specialist Governance and Compliance and Information Officer for a leading JSE-listed automotive company, operating in a multifaceted role covering a range of legal and compliance activities with a focus on emerging legislation. Having worked in the auto sector for over 13 years, Brandon has experience in the retail and distribution sectors as well as financial services. Brandon serves on the National Automotive Dealers Association, the National Executive Committee, Management Committee, Transformation Committee, Retailers Forum, Labour Forum, and PR Committee. Wow, that's quite a mouthful. And is currently the chairperson of the NAAMSA ABC Legal Forum and is a member of NAAMSA ABC BE Committee and PR Committee, as well as various special project working groups. Brandon was the convener of the drafting committee for the Consumer Protection Act's first approved industry code of conduct, the South African Automotive Industry Code of Conduct, and has previously served as mandated automotive industry representative to the Department of Trade, Industry and Competition and National Consumer Commission for CPA matters, as well as the Department of Policing's member of Ministerial Advisory Committee on the Second-Hand Goods Act, and as NAMSA ABC representative on the Competition Commission of South Africa's Standing Committee on the Automotive Aftermarket. Brandon was educated at the University of Witwatersrand and holds an undergraduate degree and master's degree in law, international law and company law, and is registered with a financial sector conduct authority as a compliance officer and with the Information Regulator of South Africa as an information officer. Welcome, Brandon. Thanks for your time and looking forward to a very interesting presentation.
Thanks, Josh. I suppose the first interesting point is that I will not take up the full 15 minutes. I see we're running a little bit behind, so I'll keep it brief. Also, as the last speaker, I want to try and keep as many people on as possible. So we've heard about disruption, change, communication, insurance, and whatnot before now. The last thing really is the legal position. You know, with COVID coming and our entire country shutting down with 1 week's notice on the 27th of March last year, and then the 9 awful days in July from the 9th of July when we saw the civil unrest happening. On a legal side, 2 of the very big things that have come up, and that's what I'm going to talk to, is this concept of force majeure, because we found in a lot of instances, one party to a contract wanted to call force majeure. And then, of course, the employee relationship and what happens in these disruptive times. So those are the 2 areas I'm just going to look at quite briefly, and then we can take questions at the end. So I thought the good place to start really is what is a civil unrest, a civil disturbance? And, you know, there's no legal definition, but the operational definition really is that it's a situation where participants become hostile towards authorities, and those authorities, in our case government, struggles or finds it very difficult to maintain that order or bring back public safety. And, you know, if it gets very bad, you get to a state of emergency declared. Otherwise, you'll see what happened from the 9th till the 18th of July, where it didn't reach state of emergency, but for 9 days, government struggled very much to bring it under control, stop the looting and things like that. Now, over that period, you know, afterwards you can look at insurance and things like that. But over that period, there was a lot of issues that came. Can we call force majeure? Can we use that contractual right to protect ourselves? Now, force majeure, basically, long Latin word, but really what it means is something objective has occurred and it prevents the performance of a party or both parties, and it's not caused by 1 or 2 of those parties. Now, this is quite a big element. So we'll look at it in a little bit more detail now, but realistically where we have to understand is that it is something that I didn't cause and you didn't cause, the 2 parties to the contract, but it prevents us from doing what we need to do to fulfill our obligations in terms of that. Now, usually the force majeure is defined and enacted through contractual means, and I'll go on to that now. But no matter what it is, the one thing you have to show is this thing called supervening impossibility of performance. In other words, was it actually impossible to perform? And only then could you call a force majeure, and then we'll go through that. Now, don't leave it to me to try and define what impossibility of performance is. What I did is a bit of research here, and luckily our courts, as far back as the year 2000 and confirmed by the Supreme Court in 2008, have spoken about what it means, this impossibility of performance. So if you'll allow me, I'll read it so that we're on the right path. It says, in every case, we have to look at the nature of the contract. We have to look at what the impossibility being invoked is. In other words, if I want to invoke a force majeure, I have to tell you what the impossibility is. It cannot be self-created. It cannot be something that I just assume. It must be, and this is the nice thing, absolute and objective, not subjective impossibility. And furthermore, your commercial circumstances which cause compliance with the contractual obligations to be difficult, expensive, or unaffordable do not pass muster, do not meet the requirement. So what all that legalese is really saying is it's got to be really big, not caused by me, not caused by you. And the party calling the force majeure has to be able to show that they absolutely cannot perform. Not that it's difficult to perform, or they just don't want to perform, or it's expensive to perform. They actually can't perform. Now, how we operationalize that one would be to look at your force majeure clauses inside the contracts. You would have to evaluate what the clauses say. You'll have to see if the clauses set out correctly how you call the force majeure, how long the supervening impossibility needs to last, and what performance/non-performance will the clauses talk to. Now, those 3 court cases that I read from, the facts of each of those cases differ, but the ultimate thing was that parties were calling force majeure saying they could not perform. And they also were saying, you have to release me from all my obligations of the contract because I can't perform. And in all 3 court cases confirmed by the Supreme Court, it's not automatic. Even if you call a force majeure, it does not release you from everything in the contract. You have to go through the clauses and see the elements that you need to be released from. And also, you still have your duty to act. So you have a duty of care. You have a duty to minimize your losses and damages. You can't just call force majeure, put your hands up, and that's that. So it's extremely difficult. And a counterparty listening to a force majeure declaration can still claim specific performance, can still say it's not factually sound, it's not factually relevant. I can show you that it's not, and I will reject your force majeure claim. And that's when we get to court. So, all I'm saying is you've got to have the civil disobedience, you've got to have this COVID level 5, not 4, 3, 2, and 1. You absolutely can't act. And then you go to the contract that you signed with the party, and then you see what it says we have to do. It's not just as easy as what I've read in a lot of articles and a lot of research, and the questions I've been asked over the last 2 years of, oh, well, it happens, so I'm calling force majeure, I don't have to pay my supplier. No, that's not at all how this works. And the final answer to everything is, if in doubt, ask your legal counsel, but make sure that your contracts are drafted correctly, and make sure that contracts have force majeure clauses in them. They are extremely important, and they don't just happen because of COVID now or because of the 9 days of unrest. We're a global integrated model in South Africa, and in the auto industry, we're importing most of our parts, we're importing most of our vehicles, and things can happen. You can get a tsunami somewhere, shuts a factory down. They will and have the right to call force majeure. You need to be able to govern those relationships on a global basis, not just looking insularly that, oh, well, another insurrection is not going to happen again, so why must I bother? It's so much to that. And the part that most people forget about, and that's why I'll spend the last 2 minutes and I'll be done, is what about your employment considerations? Now, that's my background. My background, and when I was doing my practical legal, was in employee relations and labor law. And, what happens when you close a workplace due to looting and rioting? What are some things you need to think of? Now, it came up earlier. The Occupational Health and Safety Act is the number one thing, and it says that the duty of the employer is to provide a safe working space that is free from risk to the employees as reasonably practicable. Now, when there's looting, when there's riots, a safe workplace can't be guaranteed. You may have to shut the workplace. It may be destroyed for you. We saw those pictures on the news of macros burning, car dealers burning. That's not exactly a safe environment. And the question that kept coming up was, if I can't allow my employees to come to work, do I not have to pay them? Does the no work, no pay principle apply? And the very short answer is it can, but all the guidance and the courts and everything have said it can only ever apply if it is an absolute last resort. That every single other option that could possibly have been used has been used, and still you're in a situation where you cannot pay the person, then you will apply it. Now, in South Africa, we know they extended the temporary employee relief, the TERS, to Gauteng and KZN for those 9 days and the rebuilding. So it would be very difficult to apply no work, no pay if you were to shut. And then the very last thing I want to talk about is, What if you're being proactive? So your building hasn't been burnt down, but you're saying, I want to provide the safe workspace. So I am going to proactively, as a precaution, shut my doors. Because, flooding's coming, looters are coming, rioters are coming. In that circumstance, because the company has taken that decision, and it's a precautionary decision, your building hasn't been burnt down yet, no one has been attacked yet, you don't have the right to apply the no work, no pay principle. There you will have to look at paying the guys. If you cannot do that, trying to work out special leave, end of year leave, shutdown leave. And if all of that fails, you would then have to go into a temporary reduction of pay. And if that absolutely fails, you would then start looking with agreement from the employee to look at cutting down that pay to zero on a no work, no pay basis. So those are kind of, in a very short 9 minutes that I've had, high level things to really think about your employees and your force majeure when these things could happen. Do you have the right documents? Do you have the disciplinary codes in place? Have you discussed it with the employees and their labor representatives? And do you have force majeure in place and correct and running in every single contract? And is it up to date? And yeah, that's me. Thanks, Josh.
Thanks, Brandon, for keeping it short and sharp and sweet. A very interesting presentation or discussion. Before we move into Q&As, as Brandon was saying, we're just running a bit behind on schedule. I'm just going to run some polls. So please can I ask you to participate regarding Automechanika and the show that's coming up next year in March from the 15th to the 18th at NASREC. So I'm not going to waste any more time. We'll launch the poll. So you can see it here. Please, I really encourage you to complete the polls. There are 4 questions. So we'll just give it 1 minute. We're still sitting on 0 responses. If you can hear us, please respond. %33% responded, 35%, going up 42%. We'll just give it another 30 seconds, 60%. Another 10 seconds. Okay, 70% have completed. End the poll, share the results. So the first question, have you attended Automechanika Johannesburg before? 70% said yes, 2% said no. Would you be comfortable attending Automechanika Johannesburg in March 22? 92% said yes, which is very encouraging. And it's in line with what we're seeing across our events. There's a real interest and need for face-to-face events again. The third question, what kind of content are you interested in? It's interesting to see new trends in technology, obviously, topping all of those options, followed by product launches and innovations and skills development programs. So thank you again for your input. We'll definitely take this into consideration when planning our content for next year's events. And where do you get your content from? Very interesting breakdown. So again, thanks to all that attended. I'm going to stop the sharing now. And without further ado, I'm going to introduce Jackie Olivier, who's the Chief Executive Officer for the Retail Motor Industry Organization, who's going to lead the Q&A session. Representing the RMI represents the interests of approximately 8,000 businesses ranging from vehicle dealers and motor body repairers to workshops, parts and equipment stores and service station owners. Olivier began his career at the RMI in 1992, taking care of the service station industry, and later became the regional manager of the Northern region, one of the RMI's 5 regional offices. Before being appointed as the CEO in June 2013, he served as the organization's executive director for over 14 years. In addition to his work at the RMI, he has been the chief negotiator for the entire retail motor industry, 18,000 businesses employing 300,000 employees collectively for over 15 years, where he was instrumental in securing multi-year wage agreements for peace and stability in a rather volatile labor market. Olivier previously served on various boards, including the Manufacturing, Engineering and Related Services Sector Education and Training Authority, MOSITA, the Motor Industry Bargaining Council, MIBCO, the Motor Industry Retirement Funds, MERF, and the Motor Healthcare Medical Aid Fund, MHC. Current board positions include the RMI and the Motor Industry Fund Administrators. His qualifications include a BCom Honours, University of the Free State, and an MBL, Masters of Business Leadership from the University of South Africa. Thank you, Yaki. I'd like to also ask the other panelists to turn their cameras on, and we'll start with what I believe will be a very interesting debate and discussion.
Okay, thank you, Josh, and thank you for that introduction as well. We've listened to experts in their respective fields, so well done, guys. Great information. It's a pity that we don't have that much time, in order to deal with all the questions. I'm sure I've received quite a couple directly, as in private mode, if you like. And then there's others which I'm sure you've seen. So let's optimize the time we've got. I thought just to allow some people to think about having listened to you all, let me start off asking each panelist just in 60 seconds. From your presentation, if for nothing else, what would you like all the participants to take home with them? That's 1 or 2 issues out of today's session. Just take it, take home, think about it, implement it. What would it be? Let's follow the same order of presentations. Let's go to Tammy first.
No, thanks, Yagi, about that. I think from our side and from the finance point of view, the key takeout is that we finance business. We are open to business, and the economy's got all positive signs that it will be growing. If you look at the confidence, it's been starting to pick up, and it shows the all-time high in terms of the work that we are doing. So for me, it's for every finance, as much as you put the cash flows together, you need to make sure that whatever risk that you are taking, it's secured. And we are in an economy where you are able to transfer the risk, where we are able to share the risk. So your business continuity measures must be in place. The debt that you have, you must make sure that it's secured and insured. And this will also include the supplies that you get from overseas, where there are tools for you to secure that in the event that there are unexpected loss, like your lockdown, you're able to get your stock. Because one key thing, again, we've seen suppliers where in terms of delivering product, there's been a delay due to shortages, whether it's microchipped and stuff. So for us, it's look at your business end to end, mitigating your risk. It's not a cost, it's a way of doing business to make sure that we share the cost. Thanks a lot on that.
Thank you. Robbie?
Thanks, Yaki. Yeah, no, I think with all of the change going on in the industry today, I believe, the fundamental is do change with people and not to people, involve the people in all areas. They tend to resist less and you're going to succeed more. Success, within organization really depends on the leaders who know how to lead change. Lead the change process that we're going through. And again, it's from beginning all the way through to execution in there. And we've seen the results of it. So to me, that's the most important critical takeaway, Yaki.
Oh, thank you, Robbie. I must say that I've made a big note to myself about do change with people and not to people. And that's what we commonly refer to as let's get buy-in to have the results, from whether it's staff or whether it's stakeholders. So that's great. Thank you, Robbie. Let's move to Poco.
Yes, thank you, Yaki. So I think it goes without saying that the world we find ourselves in is forever evolving, and with each day comes new disruptions. And as a result, it really helps for businesses to change the way that they could have viewed insurance, and to understand that insurance really is a key ingredients to managing risk and minimizing disruptions into the business. And it's something that is worth taking time on and make sure that the business is comprehensively covered, because as and when risk occur, it can really be disastrous to businesses. And insurance is one such important mechanism to act as a safeguard, as a matter of fact. Thank you, Yaki.
Thank you, Poco. And lastly, Brendan. And whilst you're talking, Brendan, I've got a couple of questions on force majeure as well. How people is will they recover? Will they benefit from it? Maybe you can touch on that as well at the same time.
Sure. Thanks, Yaki. Yeah, I mean, force majeure is a real hot topic. So, I mean, that would be the one thing to take away. Is to check, number one, you have a force majeure clause in your contracts with suppliers or with customers. Two, check what it says. A lot of these force majeure clauses are copy-paste, and they don't include very simple things like how long must the supervening impossibility last before you may declare the force majeure? How long can you keep the force majeure running for? What happens at the point, if it is a 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, what happens when you reach that? Is there a contract termination? I've seen automatic contract termination clauses, which are very scary, and things like that. And then to your question, is it beneficial? It is beneficial to have this because it sets the rules of the game when a party cannot perform. And I'll give you an example that I had with my employer several years ago. We used to bring in motorcycles from Japan, and the factory was destroyed in a tsunami. Absolutely, that Fukushima whole thing just destroyed. There was no stock. Now, the nice thing there is, they were able to claim force majeure, even though we couldn't get our stock. All of our requirements we didn't have to do. So we wouldn't have to place orders. We wouldn't have to meet the annual target. To that point, we would be sustainable, and we would know quick enough to talk to our customers about, if there's any orders or anything that needs to go on ship. So, one of the big things and why it's beneficial is not as a get out of jail free card or as an escape from your obligations, which was you tried to use too much. It's, at the Boy Scouts say, be prepared. You've got the rules of the game up front. You can call it, you can action it, you can effect it. And, in business, as much certainty in trying times as you can get, I think is key to being able to strategize and work. So, to me, that's why it's such an important and beneficial element to have in every agreement.
Right. Fantastic. Thank you, Brendan. Okay, as I said, I've got a couple of questions being posted to me individually and so on, and we touched on many of them already. Can I just go straight to the topic of change again? I think that is a very important one. Change is being the only constant, as they say, and first world countries normally would take the lead in implementing and developing that. How would that impact and benefit, second, third year developing countries like South Africa, from a South African perspective? Maybe, Robbie, I can pose that to you.
Sure, thank you, Yaki. When you think about it, the automotive industry is so connected. So yes, certain things first world, second world. There is a difference in speed, but it's more down at the granular level when you look at, depending on the trends, if you think of, electric vehicles versus, but the one that I think is impacting everyone right now is in terms of, you look at the consolidation going on in the aftermarket, and we've all got members, in the country, whether it's of the Nexus Group or ATR or Global One or any of those. There's so much consolidation going on at all levels. So not just distribution, but at the supplier level. And that absolutely impacts everyone. So Is there a difference of speed? Yes, there is. Some things we, in South Africa, we might even, bypass. But at the end of the day, you quite rightfully said, change is, change is the only constant in here, and there's nothing else that we can do. And it's a beautiful time at the moment when you think of, how everyone is going to be impacted by, and I'm going to call it a mutation of technology, how that impacts, parts are not going to be the same. The way we service them is not going to be the same. Everything is changing. So it's an exciting time to be in the industry today. But speed of change, absolutely different region to region around the world. In some things, I think South Africa might even be right at the forefront of some of the touchings on there. If you think of, electric vehicles, even though, when you look at the number of vehicles being sold, but from what I understand in terms of the preparations, the national, the routes, the systems, the infrastructure's in place. Now the adaptation's coming through. So, and that's still going to take a while because of the other challenges we have with Eskom and getting a regular supply of electricity. So, it's different speed at different things, and it depends really on each specific one. So I could sit here all day and talk about that. If there's any further questions, I would love to connect and, discuss them in as much detail as possible. Hopefully that answered your question, Yaki.
No, thank you. I saw on the Q&A box that ex-colleague of mine, the previous CEO, Jeff Osborne, asked, just very quickly, do we have any idea how far behind South Africa auto industry is in terms of global trends?
In terms of global trends, again, it depends which global trend, because there's probably 13 global trends going on right now. So in some of them further behind, some of them are a lot closer. Like I say, when you think of the consolidation right on top of it, when you think of, the OES IAM wall coming down, we're in the middle of that, we are not far behind, we might be weeks, months away. But other than that, those we certainly right there in amongst, the war of it. And, I think that's the exciting challenge that we have ahead. It's how do we manage it from all aspects that we've heard this afternoon.
Okay, thank you. I'm wary of time, so maybe there's, Josh, time for one or two more?
Yes, I think let's just cover another two questions, and I think then we'll start wrapping up.
Okay, if you open the question box, there's what I thought a very pertinent question as well, relating to the small business. In South Africa, the small business sector is contributing hugely towards the fiscus and towards job opportunities and all of that. And the question is going to, maybe from an insurance industry point of view, how to protect SMEs, and has SMEs being catered for in terms of a solution going forward to safeguard, their risk and mitigation thereof. Poko, do you want to venture a response to that?
Yes, thanks, Yaki. So insofar as small businesses are concerned, I think the question is quite pragmatic in the sense that if you look at your normal conventional insurance product, we're catered for big, large corporate operations. But what we're starting to see coming out of the industry right now is a focus, especially from leading insurers in the country as well, where they want to start responding to the specific need of the small businesses in the country, and that is being done by starting to offer such packaged product that can speak to the small business arrangement. And why we do that is because we know from a small business perspective, there's not really a separation between the directors or the guys that are founding the business and the business assets per se. So where we are going with it is we're starting to come up with packaged product that can be able to speak to the risk end to end, including the risk of those that are involved in funding the business. I think to that question, over a period, we will start seeing quite a lot of those solutions coming through. Although historically, the solution, as it were mainly targeted at your large corporates.
And whilst we at you, second last question, Poko, much reference has been made to premiums, impact, cost of compliance, cost to do business in South Africa is running up. Out of the unrest, out of the pandemic, how do you see the premium pattern goes?
Yeah, Yaki, that's a great one. Yeah. So without taking much more time, Yaki, so the most insurance products are actually written at the back of reinsurance companies at the back of it. And those reinsurance companies, like any business, as a matter of fact, they want to see some return onto the capital that they deploy to support capacity into the insurance operations. And unfortunately, most reinsurers were quite badly affected in relation to the pandemic, in relation to the riots, in relation to, and that is on a global basis as well, because South Africa have quite a global insurers also operating in the space. So what we're seeing is, it is true that some of the insurance premiums are now currently being revised and adjusted upward to try and compensate for the type of claims that we have seen coming there. But that, having said that, that mainly happens on a case-by-case basis and on a client portfolio basis. This is not to mean that premium increases are going to be applied across the board.
Okay, thank you. A quick one to Tammy. Tammy, in your presentation, you made reference to collaboration with the auto sector, the automotive sector. Do you want to share with us any projects which you have in mind? Very shortly, we're running out of time.
Okay. Currently, in terms of the project, I mean, we are busy with RMI collaborating, looking at your startup businesses that are coming through on that through RMI training. So we are looking at those businesses where it's set up and what are those needs that they will need. This will also include some other companies in your tire industry where the industry has come forth to work with ABSA in order to set up new businesses. So that will give more opportunity to SMEs and more opportunities to people that were sort of excluded from the industry before. So we've been doing those collaboration, also in touch with the association. So your NAMSA, your RMI, and another on that. So from enterprise development point of view, we are busy with that to make sure that there is access to market, and we've got new players coming in at the backdrop of right to repair also. So there's lots of opportunities there, and we are working with big corporates to make sure that we act as a catalyst and an enabler for people to start having their own businesses and running them on that.
Thank you, Tammy. One last one to Brandon. Brandon, legal, regulatory compliance costs has become a huge burden for business as new legislation is coming in, like POPI, like the automotive guidelines. People need to adapt. Will there ever be a time when some of those costs to do business in South Africa is mitigated effectively? And any advice on that?
Yeah, I mean, it is costly, and you have to have economies of scale. So the bigger you are, luckily, the less costly it is. It's just an inverse issue. But where we've learned and where I've learned doing this emerging legislation and compliance is, if you build in the new compliance processes, systems with the outlook for efficiency, adaptability, and competitive advantage, you do start getting a return. Compliance is enforced from government because of trust. And if you can build trust, show trust, and exceeds the trust of your competitor, then your return on investment is there, because you'll gain more customers and you'll keep your customers. So if you see it as this albatross around your neck, it's so expensive, I just have to do it, government isn't stopping, you're going to fight it. It's going to be more expensive because the fines will supersede any cost of compliance, and you won't get an advantage. You take it the other way around to build a competitive advantage, and we've seen in businesses I've been involved with, is your return. You start seeing returns, and you start seeing returns relatively fast.
Okay, thank you, Brandon. I think that's about it for which we have time today, Josh. I see that there's more questions. I'm not too sure whether Automechanika would facilitate a process where some of that can be answered and maybe given back to all those who have dialed in and participated. But on that basis, I would like to thank everybody and then hand over back to Josh. Thank you so much.
Thank you, and a really big thank you to all the panelists who spoke today. Very interesting presentations. As I said, it's a very important topic that we need to address from a legal insurance point of view and how we move forward and adapt to a changing environment. We will be sharing copies of the recording with everyone today. And my colleague Priyanka will include an email address for people to contact. I will share copies of the questionnaires or the comments to all of the panelists so that they can respond to questions in the next week or two. I'm sorry we ran over by 15 minutes, but lastly, just a big thanks to the audience, everyone who gave up their time this afternoon, and we look forward to seeing you on the next webinar. We will be announcing the dates that are coming up. I see Priyanka's just posted her email address in the comments section. So if you just want to take a quick note of that, and then you can get in touch with her directly if you've got more questions you'd like to ask. And yes, thank you. Have a great week further. And we look forward to seeing you on the next webinar. Take care and have a lovely day.
Thank you.